Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Trig BootCamp Part 1. All right. And so this series of videos is aimed at two groups. One group is AP students who need a trig refresher, and the other group is for pre-calculus students who want to learn trig really, really fast. Okay, so we are going to start from the very beginning. Okay, so trigonometry is all about angles, specifically angles that can be understood in terms of one or more sides of a right triangle. Okay, so here I'm making a right triangle, and the way to think about it is not really in terms of the triangle itself. I'm going to encourage you to think about it kind of like this, kind of like you have something that points in a direction. You have an arrow, or a more precise word would be like a vector. You have something that points in some direction, and you want to know the horizontal and vertical component of that thing. Okay, so if you want to, you can think about this as maybe like an airplane or something, an airplane making some angle above the x-axis. And so then this leg would be how far the thing has traveled along the ground. And then this thing would be how high the plane is. I think it's good to think about trigonometry this way instead of in terms of pure triangles. Okay, so anyway, let's keep going here. So we have an angle here, and we call this angle theta. And that's the first thing to understand, is that angles are measured with respect to the positive x-axis. Okay, so the positive x-axis is our starting point for writing down angles. Let's keep that in mind. Okay, now here's the angle. Relative to the angle, if I go across from the angle, directly across from the angle, we call that side the opposite side. I'm going to write O for opposite. And we also call it, and this is the preferred name for it in a calculus situation, we call this the y component. Okay, so it's called the y component because it's parallel with the y-axis. Okay, so let's try and keep that in mind. Okay, and once again, here's the angle. Here's theta. And so as we can see, the little angle arc is touching the x-axis. And so for that reason, because we measure angles with respect to the x-axis, and because this angle is touching the x-axis, we call this the adjacent side, A for adjacent, but it's along the x-axis, so we also call this the x component. And across from the 90-degree angle, here's my 90, if I go across, we call that the hypotenuse, H for hypotenuse, but we also call it the R component. R component of the angle. All right, and by using this, we can understand the definitions, the trigonometric definitions. And so I'm going to use a mnemonic device that I'm sure you've heard before, SOHCAHTOA. And this will help us remember the 6 trig definitions. So S here stands for sine, O for opposite, and H here for hypotenuse. Okay, the A here is the adjacent side, Okay? And so what this says, the reason this is useful is because this is saying that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Okay? Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to write it in its full form. Sine of the angle theta is opposite over hypotenuse. And again, the opposite is the y component, and the hypotenuse is the r component. Okay? CAH, the C here stands for cosine. Okay, so we have that cosine of theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. And the adjacent side, of course, is the x component, and the hypotenuse is the r component. All right, and finally we have TOA, so that's tangent of theta. And tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent. And if we write that down in terms of x, y, and r, we're going to have the y component over the x component. Okay, so there we go. That's the, here's the mnemonic device and the definitions that they represent. All right, and we have three more trig functions, and they are the reciprocals of what's written down here. So the reciprocal of sine is called the cosecant. And so cosecant is r over y. The secant is the reciprocal of cosine. It's going to be the r component over the x component. And the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. And the cotangent, of course, is going to be x component over y component. Okay, so there we go. There are the 6 trig definitions, along with the figure that goes with it. And then we also have another relationship between x, y, and r, and that is the good old Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so because we have a right triangle, that means we can use the Pythagorean theorem. And so the Pythagorean theorem is as follows here. We got x component squared plus y component squared, and that equals the r component squared, which is awesome. Thank you so much.
No worries.
And you too. And there we go. There is the Pythagorean theorem in terms of x, y, and r. And this is truly the starting point for everything dealing with trigonometry. Okay, so I am going to sort of call this video right here, and I'll see you in the next one.